Once there was a woman who had 3 daughters. The oldest daughter, well, she looked rather strange because she only had one eye, and it was up here, right in the middle of her forehead, and her name was One Eye. The middle daughter, well, she looked like most of us because she had 2 eyes, one on either side of her nose, and her name was Two Eyes. And the youngest daughter, well, she looked very strange because she had 3 eyes, one on either side of her nose and a third one right in the middle of her forehead. And her name was Three Eyes. One Eye and Three Eyes used to be very cruel to Two Eyes. They used to say, "Oh, we look so different, we look so special. You with your 2 eyes, you look like everybody else. Actually, you don't look like everybody else. You look much uglier than everybody else." They didn't only say cruel things, they didn't treat her very well either. They used to make Two Eyes do all the housework and all the cooking. And even though Two Eyes did all the cooking, she only got to eat what was left over after her mother and her 2 sisters had eaten. And that usually wasn't very much. She had to do all the other work as well. They had a goat, and every day it was Two Eyes' job to take the goat out into the fields to eat the grass. Actually, Two Eyes didn't mind doing that because the goat, unlike her sisters, was never cruel to her. In fact, the goat was probably the best friend that Two Eyes had. One morning, her mother and One Eye and Three Eyes said, "All right, Two Eyes, it's time to take the goat out. Have your breakfast and be off with you." There wasn't much breakfast for Two Eyes, just dried up bits of porridge that were left stuck to the sides of the pan. Well, they were dry and they were cold, and they weren't very tasty, but it was all Two Eyes had to eat, so she chewed her porridge and then took the goat out into the fields. She watched the goat eating the grass and she thought, "Even the goat has more to eat than I do, and I'm so hungry." She was so hungry that she started to cry. And she cried and she cried and she cried and she cried and she cried. She cried so much that her eyes were so full of tears she didn't see someone walking down the road towards her. Her sobs were so loud that she didn't hear footsteps coming closer to where she sat, and her shoulders were heaving so much with her sobs that she didn't feel a hand gently rest on one of them at first. But when she did, she dried her eyes of tears and she looked to see who was touching her shoulder. And there, standing in front of her, was a very old lady. "Hello," said the old lady. "Why are you crying?" "I'm crying because I'm so hungry," said Two Eyes. "My mum and my sisters, they've had lots to eat this morning, and all I've had is some dried up porridge that was stuck to the side of the pan. Even the goat gets to eat more than I do." "There's no need for you to be hungry," said the old lady. "If you want to have something to eat, all you have to do is this. Go up to your little goat and say these words: 'Little goat, bleat, give me good things to eat.' And before you know it, there'll be food for you to eat. Now, don't go wasting any. When you've eaten all you can, say these words: 'Little goat, bleat, I've had all I can eat, and any food that you've left will disappear.'" You want me to talk to this goat over here?" said Two Eyes, turning to the goat. But when she turned back to the old woman had disappeared. Two Eyes thought about what she'd been told. She had nothing to lose by trying. So she walked up to the goat and she said, she felt a bit silly talking to a goat, "Little goat, bleat, give me good things to eat. and suddenly there appeared right in front of her a table covered in a white tablecloth, and on top of that table there were pies and there were pasties and there were cakes, all sorts of delicious looking food. Two Eyes tried some of it, and it was the tastiest, most delicious food she had ever eaten in her life. She ate all she could, and then she remembered what the old lady had said. And she said the words, "Little goat bleat, I've had all I can eat," and the table of food disappeared. Well, at the end of the day, Two Eyes took the goat back home, and she didn't have any supper, even though there was some waiting for her. Well, it was actually some dried up burnt toast left over from breakfast, but she wasn't hungry, and the next day she didn't have any breakfast either. She just took the goat out into the fields and said, "Little goat bleat, give me good things to eat." And once again a table of food appeared. She ate all she could, and then she said the words, "Little goat bleat, I've had all I can eat." She didn't have any supper that day either, and after that she didn't have any breakfast or any supper. She just ate the food that appeared on the magic table when she took the goat out into the fields. It took her mother and her sisters a few days to notice that Two Eyes wasn't eating. This was because they never took much notice of what she was doing anyway. But after a few days, her mother said to One Eye and Three Eyes, "Have you noticed? Your sister isn't eating anything, even though we give her fresh gristle every day." "I think she's up to something," said One Eye. "Someone's probably bringing her food when she takes the goat out." "Yes," said Three Eyes, "that's just the sort of sneaky thing that Two Eyes would do." Their mother said, "She's certainly up to something. One Eye, tomorrow, when Two Eyes takes the goat out, I'd like you to go with her and see just what she's doing." So the next day, when Two Eyes was going to take the goat out into the field, her sister, One Eye, said, "Sister dear, today I'm going to come and help you with the goat." "Oh, are you?" said Two Eyes. "Well, that's okay. Come along with me." Now, there were lots of different fields around their house, and one of the fields was at the top of a very steep hill. And that was where Two Eyes took the goat that day, with her sister following her. It was a very, very hot day, and by the time they got to the top of the hill, One Eye was out of breath. "Why do you bring the goat all this way?" she said. "I'm absolutely worn out." "Oh, are you tired?" said Two Eyes. "Well, if you're tired, sit down and have a rest." So One Eye sat down. She was very tired after climbing that hill, and the sun was very, very hot. Two Eyes sat down next to her tired sister, and she began to sing. She began to sing a lullaby, and it went like this. "One Eye, are you awake? One Eye, are you asleep? One Eye, are you awake? Now One Eye, go to sleep." And One Eye's eye began to droop, and it began to close, and One Eye began to... and she fell asleep. And as soon as One Eye was asleep, Two Eyes tiptoed up to the goat and whispered, "Little goat bleat, give me good things to eat." And straight away a table of food appeared in front of her, and Two Eyes ate all she could, and when she'd finished she said, "Little goat bleat, I've had all I can eat." And the magic table of food disappeared. And then Two Eyes went to her sister and shook her shoulder and said, One Eye, you've fallen asleep. Come on, it's time to go back home. When they got home, her mother and Three Eyes took One Eye to one side and said, "Right, what did she do? Where's she getting her food from? Why is she never hungry?" "I don't know," said One Eye. "I fell asleep. I didn't see what she was doing." "You fool," said her mother. "Right, Three Eyes, tomorrow I want you to go with Two Eyes. You've got better eyesight than your sister. You've got 2 more eyes. You come back and tell us what she's up to." So the next morning, when Two Eyes was setting out with the goat, her sister Three Eyes said, "Sister dear, today I'd like to come and help you look after the goat." "Oh, would you?" said Two Eyes. "Well, follow me." And once again, Two Eyes took her goat up the very steep hill, with Three Eyes puffing and panting after her. When they got to the top, Three Eyes was very tired. "Why do you bring the goat all this way?" she said. "It's far too steep a climb. I'm worn out." Sit down, sister," said Two Eyes. And Three Eyes sat down in the hot sun, and she felt very tired. And Two Eyes sat beside her and began to sing. She began to sing a lullaby. "Three Eyes, are you awake? Two Eyes, are you asleep? Three Eyes, are you awake? But Two Eyes go to sleep." Did you hear? Did you hear her mistake? Did you hear how she got it wrong? Listen again and see if you hear it. "Three Eyes, are you awake? Two Eyes, are you asleep? Three Eyes, are you awake? But Two Eyes go to sleep." Yes, she'd only told Two Eyes to go to sleep in her lullaby. And 2 of her sister's eyes drooped and closed, but the third one was open. Three Eyes pretended to close her third eye, but she was still awake. She pretended to go to sleep, but she peeped through the slit of her nearly closed third eye, and she saw Two Eyes go up to the goat and whisper, "Little goat, bleat, give me good things to eat." And Three Eyes saw the table of food appear, and she saw her sister eating it. And then she heard her sister say, "Little goat, bleat, I've had all I can eat." And Three Eyes saw the magic table of food disappear. And then Two Eyes came back to Three Eyes and shook her shoulder and said, "Sister, you've fallen asleep. It's time to go back home." Three Eyes pretended to wake up. Time to go home, is it, sister dear?" she said. Come on then, let's go." But when they got back home, Three Eyes took One Eye and their mother away and said, "I've seen what she does. She sings to that goat. It's some sort of silly song she sings, and all this food appears." Well, her mother and her other sister were furious. They went up to Two Eyes and they said, "It seems you've been playing tricks on us with this goat of yours." You know, said their mother, "it's a long time since One Eye and Three Eyes had any new clothes. They've only had 20 new dresses each this year. I think they need some more new clothes. We'll need some money. We're going to go and sell your goat." And so her mother and One Eye and Three Eyes took the goat away to market to sell. One Eye watched them taking the goat away. The goat was her only friend, and she wouldn't have that any more. "Oh, they've taken my goat away," said Two Eyes, and she cried and she cried and she cried and she cried and she cried. She cried so much that she didn't see somebody walking towards her, and her sobs were so loud that she didn't hear footsteps coming across the floor, and her shoulders were heaving so hard with the sobs that she didn't see someone put their hand on them. But when she noticed a hand on her shoulder, she opened her eyes, and there in front of her was the old lady. "Why are you crying now, Two Eyes?" said the old woman. "I'm crying because they've taken my goat away to sell. I've known the goat was my only friend," said Two Eyes. "Now I haven't a friend in the world." "You have a friend in me," said the old lady. "And if you want something else, well, that handkerchief of yours, it's full of tears. You go out into the garden and you wring those tears out of your handkerchief over the grass. And next day, you'll have a special present just from me." "Out there, in the garden? Wring my handkerchief out," said Two Eyes, looking to the garden. "But what—" But when she turned back to the old lady had disappeared. So Two Eyes picked up her handkerchief that was full of tears. She took it outside into the garden and she wrung it out, letting the tears fall on the grass. Then she went back inside just as her sisters came home wearing their new dresses that they bought with the money they got for the goat. The next morning, Two Eyes got up and she walked out into the garden. And there, where she'd wrung the tears out of her handkerchief, she saw something she had never seen before. There, in her garden, was a tree that had appeared overnight, the most beautiful tree she had ever seen in her life. The leaves of the tree were made of solid silver, and hanging from the tree were apples, and all the apples were made out of gold. Two Eyes stood staring at the tree in wonder. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen in her life. And later, when One Eye and Three Eyes and her mother came out, they looked at the tree as well. "What beautiful apples," said her mother. "One Eye, go and pick me one of those apples." "Yes, mother," said One Eye, and she walked up to the tree and started climbing it and reached up for an apple. But the branch on which the apple was growing swung away and she couldn't reach it. She tried again, and that branch swung away. "Oh, you're useless," said her mother. "Come down here. Three Eyes, you've got better eyesight. You're probably a better climber as well. You go and get me an apple." "Yes, mother dearest," said Three Eyes. So Three Eyes went and climbed the tree and reached for an apple. But once again, the branch with the apple on swung away. She tried to reach another one, and that one swung away as well. "You're both useless," said their mother. "Why can't you just pick me one apple? It's not a difficult thing to do." "I think I could do it," said Two Eyes. You, said her mother and her two sisters. But Two Eyes walked up to the tree and just reached up, and a branch bent down towards her, and Two Eyes picked an apple. "I can pick them," she said. "If you can pick an apple, pick them all," said her mother. So Two Eyes climbed into the tree, and the branches seemed to move toward Two Eyes as she climbed that tree. And one by one she picked the apples and put them in her apron until she had an apron full of golden apples. She climbed down the tree very carefully, one-handed, and her mother and her sisters grabbed all the apples from her apron. "Oh, what beautiful apples, and all ours," they said. And you know, the next morning, when they got up, the tree was once again filled with golden apples. They sent Two Eyes up to pick them all again, and the next day when they got up, it was full of apples again. And every day, the two sisters, One Eye and Three Eyes, and their mother would send Two Eyes up to pick the apples. One day, when Two Eyes was picking apples in the tree, they heard a the sound of a horse coming down the road. The mother and One Eye and Three Eyes looked to see who it could be, and riding a horse towards their house was none other than the prince, who lived in the palace just a few miles away. "Oh, it's the prince," said their mother. "One Eye, Three Eyes, be on your best behaviour. The prince is coming." "Oh, the prince is coming," said One Eye. "Well, he can't see our sister Two Eyes. She's so ugly." "Oh, yes," said Three Eyes. "We'll have to hide her." And they got a barrel and they quickly put it on top of Two Eyes. The prince rode up to the house and looked at the tree. "My word," he said, "that's the most beautiful tree I've ever seen. Look at all those golden apples and silver leaves. Does the tree belong to you?" "Yes," said the woman. "It belongs to me and my two daughters here, One Eye and Three Eyes." "I've never seen a tree like that," said the prince. "You know, if you could give me just one branch from that tree, I'd give you anything you asked in return." "Oh, really? Well, we can do that," said the woman. One Eye, go and get the prince a branch from the tree." So One Eye walked up to the tree and reached for a branch, but the branch swung away from her. "I'll just climb this tree, get the branch for you," said One Eye. She started climbing the tree, but every time she reached for a branch, it swung away. And when she turned for another one, the first branch would swing back and hit her on the head. "Oh, get down," said her mother. "Three Eyes, you're a good climber. You go and get a branch from our tree for the prince." So One Eye climbed down from the tree and Three Eyes climbed into the tree. But every time she reached for a branch to pull off to give to the prince, the branch swung away. And every time she reached for another one, the first branch would swing back and hit her in the head. Finally, Three Eyes fell out of the tree. I thought you said this tree belonged to you," said the prince. "Surely if it's your tree, you could pull off a branch." Underneath the barrel, Two Eyes had been listening to everything that was going on. She lifted up the barrel and she rolled out one of the apples she'd already collected that morning. "What's this?" said the prince. "There's one of your apples rolling around on the floor. Is there somebody hiding underneath that barrel?" "Oh," said One Eye, "well, we do have another sister. She's hiding because, well, she's so ugly." "That's right," said Three Eyes. "We've got a sister who is so ugly she hides every time anyone comes to the house." Just then, Two Eyes lifted the barrel up and climbed out from underneath it. "I think, Your Highness, I might be able to get a branch from the tree for you." "Do you?" said the prince. "Well, yes, do. Have a go." So Two Eyes walked up to the tree and she climbed into it, took hold of a branch and snapped it off. She climbed down the tree, held it up to the prince and said, "Here you are. Look, this one's got 5 apples on it." The prince took hold of the branch and it was one of the most beautiful things he'd ever seen. "Can I keep it?" he said. "I'll give you anything you like in exchange for this branch. Name it, it's yours." "Well," said Two Eyes, "I don't really like living here. If you take me to live with you in the palace, well, then you can have this branch." "Of course," said the prince. The prince reached down, he lifted Two Eyes up and put her on his horse next to him. "You can come and live in the palace straight away," he said. And off he rode with Two Eyes on his horse back towards the palace. One Eye and Three Eyes and their mother were absolutely furious. "Why is he taking an ugly creature like Two Eyes away with him?" they said. "Well, at least means we don't have to look at her ugly face every day anymore. And we've got a magic tree. Every day we can look at our magic tree with all its silver leaves and its golden fruit. Ha! She hasn't got that, has she? But the next day, when the woman and One Eye and Three Eyes woke up and looked out of their window, the magic tree had disappeared from their garden. But the next day, when Two Eyes looked out of her window in her new bedroom in the palace, she saw in the palace courtyard the magic tree growing with its silver leaves and its golden apples. And every day in the palace there was a new crop of golden apples. And the prince thought it was the most beautiful thing in his palace. Well, not quite. He thought it was the second most beautiful thing in his palace, because he thought that Two Eyes was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen in his life, and he fell in love with her and married her. And the prince and Two Eyes both lived happily ever